All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Sanctified Church, where we come together today to celebrate the life of Bob Zorola, or Joe Zorola, or Brownie, whatever name that you call him. I know there's quite a variety of names. I knew him as Bob, called him Bob. I'm also blessed to have Bob and Leslie call Sanctified Church their home church, and not only did they attend church here regularly, they were dear, dear friends to my wife and I. And on behalf of the family, they are so incredibly grateful by your presence here today as we remember a man who was loved by so many people. So let's begin our service by opening in prayer. Father, we commit this morning to you, Lord, as we ask that your presence be felt here as we come to honor Bob and the life that he lived. We pray that you meet us where we are at this morning and comfort those who need to be comforted. And we ask all of this in your Son's holy and precious name. Amen. At this time, I'm going to invite Leslie to come on up and share some wonderful stories and memories about her wonderful husband. There's tissue right here if you need it. One of the boys will come up here and put their arm around you. Oh, you got some? Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm going to try to get through this, but if you belong to the Gaines family or the Zorola family, then you're emotionally gifted, like me. I want to thank each and every one of you for your kind words of support and the beautiful flowers, the cards, and the food. We would also like to thank you for donating to Camp Taylor. This is the camp that supported and continues to support our sweet Jimena, who was born with a heart defect. She just had her second birthday last weekend. Our family has been blessed by all of you. One of the things, Jack kind of touched on it, that I think I must explain is my husband's name. He was born Joe Robert Zorola. However, his family called him Bobby, or Bobby Joe, if you're from Texas. When we were in college, I met him as Bob, but then he went to go work at Disneyland, and he had to go by his first name on his birth certificate, which was Joe. So some of our friends thought I was dating two guys, Joe and Bob. It was interesting. When I had to fill out Christmas cards, I would ask, honey, do they know you as Joe or Bob? But I've always just called him Bob. I would like to tell you a few stories about my husband. He was generous and kind to everyone, and he loved to tell jokes and tease. He loved this one joke about Two Guns Gonzalez. I don't really remember the details of the joke, but the punchline was, he had two guns, so what could I do? Another punchline that would get him laughing was this joke, and he would say, washy, 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 rinsey, 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 smells like roses. And I think he just laughed harder than anyone else. He loved to play games, any kind of game. One Christmas, we played a game of Pinchy Winchy. Now, Pinchy Winchy is a silly game where everyone is told to do only what the lead person does, and if they laugh or do it wrong, they're out of the game. However, he had rubbed soot on his fingers, so when he pinched the person's cheek next to him, they ended up with black soot on their face. I think my cousin Charlie was the victim of that particular joke. Sorry. He also instigated a competition between the cousins at Christmas. I think one year the girls got Victoria's Secret gift bags with granny panties from the boys. But then the next year, the boys got whitey tidies personally decorated with googly eyes and pom-poms from the girls. Also, when opening gifts, Bob always teased the kids that there were chonies in the gift boxes. He loved his nieces and nephews and their children like crazy. I've been told that he gave the best hugs and was supportive of all of their endeavors. He would often say, "Good job, kiddo," or "I'm so proud of you." As our boys grew up, he always told them to do it right the first time. He loved going to all of their games and competitions, and one of his greatest joys was photographing their sports. He was always the dad behind the camera. Even when their team lost, he would often say, "But did you have a good time?" Speaking of the boys, you will never know how proud he was that both Jason and Joshua became military men. He had a sticker on his truck that said "Army Dad." And every Friday, and I mean every Friday, he wore a red shirt. Red Shirt Friday stands for Remember Everyone Deployed, and it's a movement designed to honor veterans and deployed U.S. troops. He was proud to honor his kids every day, but especially on Fridays. For many years, we went to Lake Powell on vacation. Each day, we would spend the morning boating. He loved driving the boat while pulling the kids on skis, wakeboards, or rafts. However, there were hours spent on the beach. If we were not hiding from a sandstorm or even a thunderstorm, we were learning to dance and sing. I think we learned to sing and dance to "Achy Breaky Heart" by Billy Ray Cyrus and "Sold" by John Michael Montgomery. There were a few drinks that some of the underage girls learned to make, like mudslides and margaritas, and I think they may have had just a sip or two. Also, I think he taught Taya to drive at Lake Powell. Not only did she learn to drive, she learned to pull the trailer all the way home. He was very picky about his boat, and anyone who rode in it was expected to clean it. I know our boys hated cleaning the boat, but Dad was so proud to hear how helpful you guys were when you went boating with other friends. He loved food, except onions. He was allergic to onions. Did you know that when you order a pizza without onions, he will get the one slice of onion that fell into the other toppings? I don't know why, but he also loved Spam, especially those Spam and rice thingies you get out on the golf course. His favorite candy was Almond Joy, and every Halloween, the kids came back to the house after trick-or-treating. They would have to search their bags for Almond Joys. Anything golf was his favorite. He loved the time he spent out there on the course with all of his golfing buddies. He said that he was a different person out there. It was important to him that you followed the rules and looked good while you were playing golf. The golf tournaments he volunteered at were near and dear to his heart, especially at Hogue, where he worked with the caddies. He loved his caddies and would tell them to be on time, look sharp, and be professional out there on the course. Oh, and by the way, if you mess around out there, you're going to have to deal with him. There were very few caddies that crossed that line because they had such great respect for him. One interesting thing about my husband is that his nickname should have been Inspector Gadget. He would find a newfangled gadget to do just about any job. We had this crazy hose that would help us put gas into the boat while it was tied to the shore at Lake Powell. He had gadgets to help him improve his golf game, gadgets to do jobs at home, gadgets for the RV, even gadgets to help him travel easier. My house is full of gadgets. My husband was a fanatic about brushing and flossing his teeth, and a fanatic about keeping his glasses clean. I used to tease him that he was obsessive like Howard Hughes in the movie Aviator. So in our vehicles, we have toothbrushes, floss, and wipes to clean our glasses. He hated to be sick, and during one of his trips to Canada, where the Home Office for Forensic Technologies, now called Leeds Online, is located, he found the perfect cure, Buckley's. Let me tell you, that stuff smells and tastes like liquid Vicks. He loved having our adult children and their wives take Buckley's even if they had a slight tickle in their throat. He always said that it tastes so bad that it scares the sickness right out of you. Speaking of our adult children, the Zorola family became complete when our boys got married. Our boys chose the best mates ever, Teddy and Jessica. Thank you for being the daughters we never had. You are both strong women, and he was proud to call you his mijas. One of the greatest joys in life was his 6 grandchildren. They called him Grandpa Brownie. It's a long story, but Bree used to call him her brown daddy. And she even had a brown daddy dance at her wedding, which filled him with so much pride. Anyway, when Bree introduced him to her twins, she said, "Look, girls, this is your Grandpa Brownie." And it just stuck. He loved each and every one of his grandchildren so much. You can imagine the looks that he got when he was out in public and the kids would say, "Hey, Brownie." One of his favorite things to do was to take a road trip after dinner. This usually meant that it was a trip to the local ice cream shop or to the 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. In conclusion, if you need to do a job, just remember, there's a gadget you can get to make that job easier. Remember to do it right the first time and enjoy life. Have fun and play games like Pinchy Winchy. Tell jokes, laugh, and dance, and remember that Almond Joy's ice cream and Slurpees make life better. But if you get sick, take Buckley's. It tastes horrible, but it will cure just about anything. And then you're good? Okay.
For those of you that don't know, I'm the oldest son, and you'll know why that's important in a second. And probably the more handsome one, but we'll come back to that. As my mom said, my dad was an Inspector Gadget. If there's anything that I got from him, it was probably that. And the fact that I work in technology now is proof of that, I think. It came back and got me. So my wife joked that I would use ChatGPT to help me write a poem, but I did. And it couldn't be more fitting, so I'll start with that. A golfer's swing, so smooth, precise. On the course, his aim was always nice. A policeman brave, with duty to serve. He never once wavered, held fast to his nerve. A grandfather with stories, wisdom in hand, guiding his family, the rock of the land. As a trainer, he knew the path to succeed, helping others grow with every good deed. For 23 years, he fought with grace, cancer in his mouth, yet never lost pace. A warrior in life, through joy and strife, a husband, a fighter, a well-loved life. I couldn't have wrote it any better, but I figured my dad would appreciate a little bit of technology in there. I do have a story I want to tell about my dad, but the truth is, my father was a lot of things to a lot of different people, and most of you are here today. Some couldn't make it, duty calls. But as much as he was my father, he was a father figure to a lot of people. He was a father figure to boys who became men. And he was very proud. One of my closest friends, some of you may know him as Grizz. He didn't grow up with a father. And my dad, every time he saw him, would say, "How you doing, son? It's good to see you, son." I'm proud of you, son. And he meant it. And that meant a lot of things, or that meant a lot to a lot of people. Another one of my really good friends, Greg, lived with us for some time. And he was very proud of Greg and the man that he became. And many others, the twins, Terrence, who lived with us for a bit, Marvin, who I think was probably the first one that he opened his house to live with us. But he was a father figure to a lot of people. And there's probably many other stories. He was a mentor, a trainer, an avid golfer. As much as he wanted the golf bug to stick, it probably didn't stick with me much. But it definitely stuck with my son and my daughters, who enjoyed going to the driving range with him and hitting golf balls. He was a photographer. He got to do some really cool stuff, taking pictures in a lot of cool places. And most of the pictures that you see on the slide at the beginning and at the end and in between, they're only from the last 10 years. Because if we really sat down and looked at all the pictures that he's taken over the last 50 years, it would be an hour long, if not longer, and you'd only get to see a quick second of each picture. So, yeah, there's just so many pictures, and we still have more to find in storage and everything. So, he was a photographer. He was a friend to a lot of you, a brother, a confidant to some. He actually probably was a sommelier, or at least thought he was. He loved to collect wine, and you'll see that at the house. Ultimately, though, he was a comedian. He was a jokester. He was a funny guy, but he knew it. And you'll hear a lot of stories about that. So, I'm going to try and get through the story. But the story is the final foursome. My dad's last round of golf was almost a year ago to the day, Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. It was one of the last tee times available that evening at Birch Hills Golf Club in Brea. He knew he would be fighting against the setting sun to get through more than 9 holes. It didn't matter. He started off like he did probably every time he played a round of golf on the range, hitting a few golf balls to warm up and stretch. He was paired up with a mediocre, rowdy bunch of golfers, young golfers, but it didn't matter. The first of the foursome, and the youngest, teed off and hit a rather decent ball on a very easy par 3, and he grinned. Almost surprised, but really thinking, man, where did this kid learn to play? The other two in the foursome were brothers. Bearing very little resemblance in size or stature. Couldn't have timed that better myself. The older of the two, much more handsome than the other, but it didn't matter. They played on through the next few holes. The other brother losing more balls than anyone cared to say out loud. The younger brother just trying to keep up pace with them, and the youngest of the foursome still new to the game of golf and learning the etiquette of the course, which on any other day, my dad probably would have gladly enforced. But it didn't matter. The golf course was busy that evening with many other twosomes and foursomes getting stacked up at each hole, waiting for the other. And normally that would have really bothered him. Those of you that played golf know what I'm talking about. But it didn't matter. With ease and grace and very little effort, so it seemed, Bob played through the first 9 holes, never once keeping score. But it didn't matter. Though it began getting dark and hard to see where your ball ended up, the youngest of the group wanted to finish it out. And normally, I think he would have probably called it and said, maybe next time, bud. It's getting kind of dark. But it didn't matter. He ended the round a little more tired than normal for 9 holes, but it didn't matter. He made his way to the parking lot with the rest of the group to pack it in for the night, loading his golf clubs to head home, never once wondering what he scored or whether he had a good round of golf, because it really didn't matter. You see, this was his final foursome. And if you didn't know by now, the brothers in this story were me and my brother. And the youngest golfer was his grandson. Colson, my son, who he taught to play golf. It was their thing, and they loved doing it. I didn't realize it then, but I drove home that night thinking about that round of golf more than any other round of golf I've ever played. Well, I haven't played much, and I'm a terrible golfer. But nevertheless, I've thought about it a lot since then. My dad probably didn't know that was going to be his last round of golf. He went into surgery less than a week later that ultimately ended his golf game, as most of you knew it. Which is ironic because even after all that surgery, he made it look really easy, and I think there's probably a video that at one point you'll see today. But it was the time that it was the last time I saw my dad truly in his element, unencumbered by the stresses of the world. He seemed free. It was truly a man at peace in a world that he helped build, because without him, it wasn't possible. All that aside, I think it's also fair to say that many of you who played golf with my dad probably saw a different man out there. It truly was his domain. It's where most people learned about him at his core. It's where he himself found his core, both literally and figuratively, as a kid in Imperial Beach at Coronado Municipal Golf Course, and again back in late 1988, early 1989, when Bob Johnson tricked him into going to hit golf balls down at Riverview Golf Course. My dad wasn't all golf all the time. There were many other aspects of his life that I could go on and on about. But I don't have that much time. And besides, you're going to hear a lot of stories today from a lot of his friends, stories that I couldn't tell myself if I tried. And I don't want to take away from that. But I do want to thank him for a few things before I close. Macho man. All right. Thank you, Dad, for teaching me that shaking a man's hand should be with purpose and to look him in the eye when you do it. Thank you, Dad, for finding a way to cheat the system and always be on the sidelines of my high school football games as the honorary sideline photographer. And like my mom said, thank you, Dad, for teaching me to do it right the first time so that I don't have to do it again. I probably took this one to heart more than anything else that I learned from him. But it's resurfaced recently in my adult life, now that I oversee teams of large teams of people, both in my military career and in my regular job. I've been trying to think of how I want it to translate to my children, and it goes like this. Do it right the first time, and you don't have to do it again. And this is the part that I think that was the way that I interpret it, and maybe it was what he was expecting us to interpret it as, but in that first time, if you fail, that's okay. Learn from that. And the next time you do it, don't make the same mistake. And lastly, thank you, Dad, for stepping in to support my family when I couldn't be there on my deployments. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. The overpouring of support and love that you've shown our family and my mom is proof that my dad's touched each and every one of you in a different way, whether it was the wine group or Lake Powell, the police force. I know he had a very wide reach. Thank you all for your time.
So I'm the other brother. And kind of to touch on my brother's speech, guarantee you my dad did know the score because he would never tell you what the score was, but he knew it. And when I golfed with him a lot, I would say, Dad, what did I get? He goes, oh, you got a 6. It's like, oh, I had a 4. Anyways, so thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend my father's memorial. Memorial service, and for joining us and bidding farewell to my father one last time. Joe Zorola was born on March 26, 1957, in Brownsville, Texas. Due to his asthma, he moved to California around 1964 and settled in Imperial Beach. He attended Mar Vista High School and graduated in 1975. Joe then moved to Fullerton and attended Pacific Christian College and Cal State Fullerton later on. In 1978, he met my mother, Leslie, and they got married 4 years later. During that time, he was employed at Disneyland in the security department. He began his service with the Orange Police Department on December 17, 1984. And during his law enforcement career, he performed various roles, including Assistant Reserve Officer Coordinator, Hostage Negotiation Team Member, Traffic Master Motor Officer, Background Investigator, and Acting Training Manager. After 3 years, 9 months, and 4 years into his law enforcement career, my dad was involved in a serious motorcycle accident while responding to an officer needing assistance request. Thankfully, he survived the incident by God's grace. My dad is survived by his wife, Leslie. His sons, Jason and I, his daughter-in-laws, Jessica and Teddy, and his grandchildren, London, McKinley, Colson, Jacob, Jackson, and Jimena. As many of you have noticed, there are a few of us in the room today who are wearing their military dress uniforms or appropriate dress uniforms for their service. My dad was very proud of everyone who served, and he felt honored to share with many that he was close to many who served. To the police, first responders, military, thank you for your service, and thank you for honoring my dad. As I stand here today, I realize how fortunate I was to have Joe, Bob, as my father. Funny story about my dad and his legal name. Growing up, I never knew my dad's legal name. When asked what my dad's name was at a young age, I didn't know whether to answer Joe, Bob, Bobby, Jose. I didn't know. It wasn't until I was an adult that I learned that Bob was what typically his friends called him and Joe was what his work name was. Still couldn't figure it out when people would ask me. We are deeply moved by everyone's contributions to Camp Taylor. It has been a challenging time for my family. In September of 2022, my wife and I welcomed our third child, the one running around over here, who was born with a heart defect. Her heart was repaired on December 19th, 2022. Just a few days later, my dad underwent extensive surgery for cancer, this being surgery 2 of 4. Despite their different battles, my dad found hope and strength in our daughter's successful operation. He drew inspiration from her resilience, and it gave him the strength to fight his own battle. Camp Taylor has been a source of joy and normalcy for our daughter, providing a safe and fun environment for her to grow into the strong individual she is today. Thank you to everyone who has supported Camp Taylor. Together we have contributed over $3,000. There are no words to express his influence on my life. Through his example, I learned to be the father and husband I am today. My father was hardworking, strong, loving, and gentle. What you guys can't see is on my end. Here, the word gentle has an asterisk around the word. In his own gentle manner, he strongly believed that things had to be done in a certain way. He was firm. Greg. He was firm, outspoken, in making sure he received what he desired or had paid for. We cherished him for being true to himself, as he always had the best of intentions. He loved his family and was deeply devoted. He loved his family and was deeply devoted to my mother, Leslie. This one's the hard part.
Yeah, last night, remember, I finished it both times. Yeah, okay.
For the past 23 years, my dad always made sure to check in on you before sharing his own struggles. His ability to prioritize your well-being was a testament to his resilience in facing challenges. Those who died yesterday had plans for this morning, and those who died this morning had plans for tonight. Don't take life for granted. In a blink of an eye, everything can change. So forgive often, love with all your heart. You'll never know when you may not have that chance at life again. Today there is no time. Tomorrow there will be no energy. And the day after tomorrow, we may no longer be here. So don't delay on anything. Live in the now. My dad showed strength and love. You know it's coming, huh? My dad showed strength and love right up until the end with us. I hope that one day, when I die, my children can look back, tell funny stories, and talk about how I love them and their mother. Then, where are they at? Then, thank you. He knows this one's a tough one, so. Then, like my father, I was doing good until my middle child walked in with me. He goes, "Where's Brownie?" It's like... Then, like my father, I'll have led a complete life. Thank you. Chief of Police.
Thank you. Leslie, I'd like to thank you for letting me stand up here for a few minutes and talk about Joe, as I knew him first originally, and then I found out his name was Bob. Jason and Joshua, thank you both for your service, number one, and thank you for giving me your dad to golf with, because as listening to you talk, I was thinking maybe I was that son he never had that he could yell at on the golf course. I don't know, maybe a little bit, but I want to talk to you all about Joe from my perspective. I knew him from the police department, and I knew him as a golf buddy. And a lot of you don't know me. I don't know a lot of you, but I've probably heard of a lot of you in our experiences. So in looking back at Joe's personnel file, there was a lot of things that I had no idea. He was a forklift driver. He sold Polaroid cameras. He got fired from a job for falling asleep on a recliner. He was a security guard at Disneyland and Disneyland Hotel. And he was a reserve officer with Anaheim PD for a very short period of time. When he was hired by Orange PD, he spent time getting commendations along with getting in trouble. Like claiming that a car that he was searching caused the accidental discharge of the gun that was on his ankle to shoot the ground one late night. I don't even know if you guys knew that story. Cops will understand that one. Everybody comes up with a funny story of how your gun accidentally went off, and it's usually not true. But in 1987, Chief Streed wrote in one of Joe's annual evaluations, which I found this on Laserfish, and it took me 2 weeks to get access. 1987, Joe, you're the kind of officer that makes Orange PD what it is. Keep up the great work. And that sums up Joe. And I know his career was short, but at Orange PD, he was an awesome man. And man, people missed him when he retired. So to our relationship, Joe and I met each other in 1989 when I became a sponsored recruit at the Fullerton Reserve Police Academy. And Joe was on the tactical staff, and I think he was on the tactical staff before the motorcycle crash. So soon after, he was on crutches. And I had heard about this guy, Zorola. Hey, you don't want to mess with Zorola. And I'm like, wait, we work at the same place. How's that possible? So even on crutches, he still imparted fear like crazy on all of us police academy recruits. And even after the crash and him being there on crutches, he demonstrated his love and care for teaching kids how to be cops. I was a kid. Fast forward 8 months later, in 1990, I attended the full-time police academy at the Sheriff's Academy in Garden Grove. I saw Joe one off day at the police department. He said, hey, how's it going? We had casual conversation. I said, man, this academy is nothing like your academy. This academy is easy. Ooh. Now, we had shook hands and even smiled at each other after I graduated the Reserve Academy, so I thought we were friends. Needless to say, on Monday morning, I watched the entire Sheriff's Academy drill instructor staff, I don't know if there's any of them here, march directly toward me. And I was the subject of complete torture for the entire day because I said their academy was easy. Who was standing on his crutches in the corner? Joe Zorola. He had ratted me out to the sheriff's staff. Obviously, he thought it was funny, but ultimately, I think it was because he cared. He wanted me to know that the police career wasn't easy. Shortly after that, Joe retired due to the injuries from the crash, and I didn't see him for a long time because remember, we didn't have cell phones back then. Many years later, we reconnected when he was working for the forensic technology company, and he had learned I had moved up in the ranks and I had some decision-making powers, so of course it was a business call. Hey, what can you do for me? I'm in this new job. Moving ahead years later, I was hitting golf balls at Black Gold Golf Club. I love to golf. I see this guy on the driving range. I look over, I'm like, no way. I mean, it had been years. I said, Joe Zorola, is that you? And his reply was, Adams? I was immediately taken back to 1989 where I stood at attention and said, yes, sir, on the Black Gold Golf Course driving range. Next thing I know, we're playing a round of golf together at Black Gold Golf Course. Our love of golf reconnected us. We went on to play together casually, in tournaments, in a league. I got to meet some great people who are probably here today that worked at the Hogue. where Joe was the caddy master and the volunteer of the year, I think last year, for the entire senior PGA Tour, which is awesome. We'd share photos of golf adventures, funny memes. He'd also ask me frequently how I played so much golf and stayed so white. And from then on, I was referred to only as Amigo, as probably some of you in this room have the same nickname. We traveled to Palm Springs together for a 2-day tournament a couple years ago where Joe and Leslie introed me and my Leslie to our new favorite place called Las Cazuelas Nuevas, a Mexican restaurant. And although at that time it was just a dinner together, the cool part about that now is it's become a fond memory that'll live on forever for me and my wife, and for me with my memories of Joe. We recently took our kids there. I'd never been there before that you took us. We've recently taken our kids there. We took some other friends there, and I'm able to spend some time remembering our time there with Leslie and Joe, and just memories of Joe come flooding back every time we go there. I remember at one golf outing, not long before he stopped playing golf, we were waiting to tee off, and Joe looked at me weirdly, and I said, "What?" Thinking I had mustard or something on my face from the hot dog. And he said, "You know what, amigo? I still can't believe you're El Jefe." And I said, "Pretty cool, huh? You started me out in this career when I was a kid, and now we're two old guys playing golf." So listen, when somebody gives you their time and are authentic, those are the people that you want to be around. And Joe was one of those guys for me. He was authentic, he gave me his time, and I wanted to be around him. It was very infrequent that I would turn down an opportunity to play golf with him. Conversations always started with family and about the grandkids. Of course, I did get to hear how his job took him and Leslie to wonderful places where he got to play the nicest golf courses, and about wine tasting and other fun, great trips with friends. We shared a love for travel, and of course, he boasted how my Marriott Bonvoy status would never reach his level. He did, many times, because I'm a Bonvoy guy. I was so happy to see our friendship grow, and even in the last few years, try to feel his pain through the latest battles of cancer while we were playing golf, and try to offer encouragement. When I visited Joe at the hospice house, quite frankly, I didn't know what to do. I was numb. Leslie said, "Talk to him. He can hear you." I walked in, and the staff said, "Who are you?" Of course, when you walk in like this, everybody always asks, "What are you doing here?" Shock. I said, "I'm here to see my friend in room 1. They said, "Go on in, talk to him." And of course, my cop response is he going to hear me? Is he going to wake up? And she said, "He's not going to wake up." And that was tough for me. So I said my goodbyes, and then I just sat in the car for a while in disbelief. But thankfully, Joe and I had a great friendship. I knew what was going on and the potential outcome that none of us ever wanted to think about. Every conversation we had in a golf cart or at a golf course, Joe was so positive. But I always knew deep down that he knew what the outcome was going to be. But fortunately for Joe, he had the love of Leslie and the family and all of you that are here today, and some of you that are probably watching. And I want to leave you with this. Interesting enough, a video of a Rick Warren speech just popped up on a feed a couple days ago for me. And he said, "I've been at the bedside of thousands of people who were in their last days. And not one time did someone say to me, 'Bring me my trophies, or my college degrees, or my certificates, or my golf trophies, because I want to look at them one more time.'" Nobody ever said that. Now, I know this wasn't Joe's scenario. This wasn't how things went with Joe. This wasn't Joe's final days. But what Rick Warren said that caught my attention was, what people that are dying want to be with is not their things. They want to be with people they love. And Joe had that, surrounded by people he loved. Because eventually we all figure out that this life is not about things. It's about relationships. It's about love. It's about family. It's about faith. And Joe lived that. Joe was a man full of love, and he lived that. And like you said, none of us are promised tomorrow, and life is short. So I hope everybody hears that and realizes that love, relationships, and faith are so important. And don't wait for those dying days. And I know, like I said, this isn't Joe's scenario, but it caught my attention. I wanted to, every time I get an opportunity to speak, I always want to leave somebody with something that they can remember. So although we will all miss Joe or Bob or Joe Bob or Bobby, Brownie, Chief, Dad, I'm sure there's probably more. Let us celebrate the moments that we shared with him and honor his memory by embracing life with the same passion and love that he did. Last night I was at a fundraiser, and it just happened to be at the Newport Beach Country Club. And where was I standing with a group of people? Directly overlooking the driving range at Newport Beach Country Club, where Joe was the caddy master for many years. It's amazing how many things, and you're probably thinking about them right now, that are going to bring back memories of Joe forever throughout your life. Leslie, please know that you have me and the Orange PD with you for anything that you know or anything that you need. I take photos of everything. I have dozens of photos of Joe Zorola on the golf course. I just sent Leslie just a couple. I even took a picture of his parking spot at Newport Beach Country Club because it has his name on it. But I do take pictures of everything, and I'll have memories of Joe forever. So I miss him. Joe, thanks for your leadership, your friendship, and your fun times. I will forever miss my amigo. Thank you.
We have so many friends that are here today to tell stories, and just to let you know, we're going to have an open microphone at the house, and we want to invite you all here, but if we had an open microphone here, we'd probably be here for another 2 hours, everybody telling stories. So we have a few people that are going to tell some stories today, and like I said, if you have other stories, we would love to hear them at the house. But Nacho?
My name's Ignacio Martinez. Bobby Zorola and my dad. We're the best of friends. When I think of my dad and Bobby, I think of two golfers who were punctual, fastidious, both cooked, married white women. We might have to pull their Mexican cards. Growing up, we saw the Zorolas a few times a year. My dad held a golf tournament for the Mar Vista Athletics, and the Zorolas would come down every single year, and this is where we got to know Jason and Josh really well. It was something we looked forward to every year. Which brings me to a couple funny stories that I want to tell. There was a time where my dad and Bobby went to Augusta to the Masters, and my mom, brother, and I drove up for whatever reason, and I don't know if we spent the night or not, and we went with my dad and picked up Aunt Les and Jason and Josh, and then I think Uncle Bobby was coming from a transfer flight, and we were dropping my dad off at the airport, and then the four of us were going to go back and spend the night. Well, on the way back from LAX, my mom and Aunt Les were in the front, and the four of us were in the back. And Jason and I thought it would be funny to tell Davey and Joshua to start throwing things out the window. Well, it first started with something stupid like a paper clip, and then started leading into golf tees and golf balls, to which we were cracking up, laughing so hard, and our two moms in the front were oblivious, having their own conversation, and the two of us were laughing. Well, I think it ended that a set of keys got thrown out the window. To what they were from, I have no idea to this day, but that story always makes me laugh. There was another funny one my dad and Bobby told me, because my father's passed now 12 years. Bobby and my dad got into an argument, which is hard to believe, and Bobby, at the time, you have to understand, was a lot bigger than my dad. This was in high school, and they were driving on the freeway, and my dad, for some reason, was extremely scared of Bobby, and he started to open the door on the freeway, and Bobby kept going, "What the hell are you doing, Nacho?" and trying to pull him back in, which I don't know what happened or what led to that, but it just always kind of made me laugh, and which leads to the next event, that my dad then flipped a golf cart one time at Campestre Country Club, which led to the two of them wrestling on the putting green, which is extremely ironic considering that if either of them had heard of one of us wrestling on a putting green, it would have been worse than us crashing a car or getting an F in school. That's how much they took the game seriously. Another funny one is about Colston. Uncle Bobby told me he went out to play golf with him one time, and he asked Colston, he said, "All right, what club do you want to use?" He said, "I want to use the bread club." I kept going, "What?" "Yeah, the bread club." What club are you talking about?" "The bread club." And finally pointed to it, and he said, "Oh, the hybrid. The bread club." And I really enjoyed that. I know I keep bringing both of them up, but when I think of Uncle Bobby, I think of my father. Here he comes. Captain America. Yeah, there we go. I could use one of those. When my dad died, Uncle Bobby continued to be very present in our lives. He was not overbearing or judgmental, but just there. Find it. He was always there to just send an off-color joke or a picture of a good-looking girl. He was kind. He was compassionate. He touched the lives of those he loved. And I was blessed to have had him in my life as long as I had. And may he rest in peace.
Thanks, Nacho. Next, I'd like to bring up Roy Peterson, who was my white father, I guess.
Hey, you took my line.
I didn't. I haven't read your speech. So.
I was going to introduce myself as a white dad. So, and my kids, they did call him Brownie, and very, very proud of that. And my name's Roy Peterson. I first met Joe when he went through the Reserve Academy. I was a staff officer. And they talk about everybody being afraid of him. He was scared to death of me, but only because he came only up to here. And I like bouncing my little campaign hat right on top of his head and stuff. But matching 1 for every push-up, it was all fun and games. Anyway, he got hired later on at the City of Orange to go full-time. Didn't have a whole lot of interaction with him at the time, but later on, he got a motor slot that I was really going for, okay, motorcycle slot. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy's got hardly any time on the street, and he's getting this motor slot. Well, I ended up getting the next slot, and so Judge Jeff Gray and he and I were the original Three Amigos. Okay, if you ever watch that show, you know, the slap, slap, boom, boom, thrusting, and all that. Well, I think that's how then Macarena got started. Because we didn't do it just on standing there. We did it on a motorcycle. That was quite a show. Okay, and anyway, he was an exceptional rider. I counted on him a lot after his crash to help me out, believe it or not, with training some of the motor officers and things. I'd bring my motorhome out. He'd bring out the little crutches and all that stuff and everything, and help me out and, help with pointers to some of these people. And I had one that was having a real difficult time. And I was so frustrated, it was unbelievable. And Jill goes, "Let me get on the motorcycle." Guess what? That was probably one of the worst decisions I ever made in my life. The guy's in a cast. He's got his arm like this. And he's going, "Let me ride that motorcycle. I'll show you how to ride that thing." And it's the Eliminator. For the motor officers out there that know what it is, it's really a difficult cone pattern. And so he gets out there side saddle and nails it. I mean, and so what could the trainee do? Okay, here's a guy that's on cast and all weirded out. I mean, he's trying to grab a hold of the throttle like this, and he's sitting side saddle and then nails it. And so, needless to say, I'd put that trainee up against anybody riding a motorcycle after that. Did really well. Also, when I went upstairs for a little while to work in admin, he became a TAC officer for the sheriff's department. Somebody already stepped on that one a little bit there. But I was really proud of him. He's all laid up and everything else. That he wants to come back to work. He doesn't want to retire at all, but he wants to stay a police officer. It was in his heart, big time. And so he went out there. Training was his big thing. He loved to train. He still did to the very end. And he was quite a legacy there. And unfortunately, he had to retire out because of his injuries. But you know what happened after that? The fun began. Okay, we started ocean fishing out in Mexico and stuff like that, and that's where the brownie side of him really came in handy. Boy, did we eat good. Oh my God. He'd tell the cooks, "Okay, this is how we do it. This is what we do." So it was real good on these long-range trips. And then also, he went hunting with us a lot, okay? And he started out with his family doing the hunting things, Leslie's family and stuff, and then he started going with me and my buddies and that. The problem was wearing these big bright orange jackets and everything else. Well, you always knew where Joe was. He was on the side of the hill over there. He looked like just a big ball of orange because he had this jacket. He was always cold and he was laying out there. But the bad thing was is when we got done, we never got back before the sun went down and all that. And he'd get back and he's all energized. Let's play games. Let's play games. Well, we end up playing games sometimes till 2 o'clock in the morning. He's out there going, flipping cards, and we're all like, oh, we're dying. We got to get up at 4 o'clock, right, and head out again. So, he was always one up for games, and then he'd go right out again and start sleeping all over again. Golfing. Everybody loves a good golf story, okay? I'm going to keep it kind of short, but he says, we're on Mesquite, Nevada, and I don't know how many of you have been out there, beautiful courses out there, and he takes me into one of the courses that's like really, really tough. I don't know any different. I don't play golf. I didn't play golf then. And he says, no, big deal. Well, we're in some golf clubs and all that. So we go out there, and he says, go ahead and tee it up, the first one. And I go, bam, and it doesn't even make it to halfway to the red tees. And he goes, you know what happens now, right? You got to drop your drawers. I'm like, what? You got to drop your drawers? And he goes, yeah, you got to drop your drawers. So I go, I got my shorts on. I go, and so I'm standing there and I'm going, okay, your turn. So you can just imagine. He's like, I'm standing right in front of him. He's like, oh. He didn't make it either. So we both go over and start picking up our golf balls with our pants around our legs and stuff. And we walk up, and we go to hit the next ball, and we start walking down the fairway, pulling up our pants. And we go, wait a second, we gotta go back and get our golf cart. It was a riot. So, and then we talked about camping and stuff like that. We did a lot of camping together, San Diego every year at Labor Day and stuff for 30 years. I mean, it's a long, long time. And of course, Lake Powell and the Powell Babes, and several of the Powell Babes are here today. And that's when they talked about a little bit about the monsoons come through and the winds and everything else, and everything get blown out into the lake, and the Powell Babes, Leslie included, and my wife included, would jump on the wave runners and go chase down everything and start pulling it back and all that. And Joe was one of the experts at anchoring boats, so he'd be out there, saving boats and everything. It was really nice. Anyway, and endless family gatherings. I mean, we're always together. He is my best friend. He really is. And we went through some tough times together at the very end. I feel guilty to a certain extent because I got cured. And I didn't. And he didn't. But, Joe's a man of faith, and I'm sure he's in good hands. Thank you.
I'd like to bring up Jeff Gray. Where's Jeff at? He's right here. This is a particularly fun story for me. I think I've known Jeff my entire life. And for those that might not know, I was the ring bearer in his wedding. So there's some pictures floating around. I'm sure you'll see today. But Jeff, thanks.
Good morning. My name's Jeff Gray, and this is Joe's pal, Alf. And there is a story about Alf. I met Joe back in Orange PD. I was riding motors. I got injured. I had to go back into the office for a year. And unfortunately, on my last day of being inside was the night that Joe had his accident. So I got the one to investigate the accident. I was with Leslie that night at the hospital, and a lot of good times. Jason mentioned that Joe was the photographer, and he also took the photographs at our wedding. Like I said, Jason was the ring bearer. Josh, you were there, but you weren't much bigger than this. You got passed around a lot that day at the wedding. So, like Roy said, we were the three amigos. Roy belonged to the sailing club in Newport Beach, so he decided the three of us would go out sailing one day. So Joe's mom made homemade tamales, and we had some beer. We took out, and we got out for about a mile and a half off the Newport Beach coast. And we were sitting there floating, for about an hour, and then all of a sudden there was a big thud, and the boat kind of came out of the water a little bit, and Joe grabbed onto the boat, and Roy's looking around. What just happened? So Joe looks over the side of the boat, and then he starts splashing in the water. And Roy and I are looking at each other like, Joe, what are you doing? He turns around, big old smile on his face, petting a whale. A whale surfaced up on the boat while we were out there. So there's like 30 or 40 foot gray whale right up against the boat, and Joe's just having fun in the water, petting the whale. So when Joe was in the hospital last year, my wife Tony and I went to visit him. And Tony goes, we need to take him something. I go, I have the perfect gift to take Joe. Alf. So Joe smiled, he started laughing, he looked at Leslie, he goes, tell the Alf story. Okay. Talked about him being a practical joker. Well, turnabout's fair play. Because when Joe was riding motor, he had a smaller Alf on the antenna of his motorcycle. And on Thursdays was formal briefing. We had to come out and have the motorcycles inspected and stuff. So we went out, came back, everybody's laughing. Joe walks up to his motorcycle. Alf's on the motorcycle, but Alf is shaved. He has no hair on him. He's on the antenna. Joe thought, very funny, thank you. About 2 weeks later, it was Thursday again. He came back, and this time Alf was there. Had his hair, but he was quite a bit shade darker in color. Joe goes, okay, enough's enough. So we let 3 or 4 weeks go by. Briefing again. Joe comes back, but this time Alf has a bandana over his eyes. He has a cigarette in his mouth and a noose around his neck, and he's hanging from the doorway in the traffic house. So, like I said, turnabout was fair play. Practical joker and Joe. We've had a good time. Known Joe almost 40 years. I will miss him, but I know I'll see him again. And this morning, I was out on the road early. Dire Straits music came on. It was a walk of life. And Joe had quite a walk of life. And the next song after that was I Wish for a Miracle. Well, some people may think Joe didn't get a miracle. Joe had a miracle the day he married Leslie. She gives the strength behind him and the family. And I know she'll be well. And knowing that he's above, watching over her and all of us. Thank you.
Next we have Terry. So Terry is his, they call them brothers from another mother. So.
Sorry about that. My knees are shot and I can't get up and down very well. Leslie mentioned the Two Guns Gonzalez joke, and I just thought I'd throw something in on that because it's not a joke we can tell here in church, but we can tell it later. But that was one of his favorite go-to jokes. Then years later, maybe 10, 15 years later, I asked him to tell it, and he goes, how does it go? I go, how do you not know how your own joke goes? So I had to tell it to him. I met Joe almost 50 years ago. It's kind of hard to condense 50 years into a couple minutes here, but we'll give it a shot. Leslie asked me to tell the Dirk Pitt story, which is I'll do in a second. But I met Joe right when he was transitioning from Bob to Joe. I kind of vacillated on what I would call him, but my favorite one was Billy Bob. That's what I preferred to call him. I grew up in Fullerton. My mom taught English at Cal State Fullerton. And they had this beat-up travel trailer next to the house. It was an old 20-footer that was not roadworthy. So they thought, what could we do? Maybe we should rent it out to somebody, some student at Cal State Fullerton. And Joe answered the ad, and the rest is history. It wasn't much longer until he became part of our family. And we became part of the Zorola family. We were in houseboating one time in the early 90s, but not like how Roy was saying, how they did it off the beach. We actually rented a houseboat. And Joshua was not there because he was deemed to be too little, but Jason was 6, and Joe and Leslie and my mom and dad and the rest of the Kilkers. And so we would go off on his houseboat. My mom loved to read, and she would bring 20 books for a 2-week vacation and read most of them. And one of her favorite authors, a guy named Clive Cussler. And I don't know if you ever heard about him, but his big hero was a guy named Dirk Pitt, his alter ego. He described Dirk as having emerald eyes and wavy black hair, and he struck fear into everybody's heart with his piercing looks and whatever. So Dirk Pitt was like James Bond on steroids. He could do things that no human could possibly do. And my brother Tim was there reading them one day, and reading these stories, and out loud, and we're all laughing because it's so ridiculous. And when you're going out on Lake Powell, for those of you who haven't been there, a lot of the canyons are pretty narrow. The cliffs are extremely high. I mean, you're up 200, 300, 400 feet straight up. And you get off by yourself. My mom always wanted to be where nobody else was. So we found this spot, and we were camping. And that night, well, I got to back up for a second here. We were, the boats were beat up. They were old. They had no air conditioning. The beds were just wooden planks with these thin little mattresses, and I think the prison system has better mattresses than those boats did. And at night, we would haul the mattresses up on top of the boat, and we would all sleep out there. So this particular night, it starts to rain, of course, and then it started raining a little harder, and eventually we all took our mattresses one by one and got downstairs because it was pouring rain. And now it's really coming down, except for Joe's still up there with my brother Tim. And if you saw that scene from Forrest Gump where Gary Sinise is up in the crow's nest and defying God, and it's crazy. It was just like that. And the rain's pouring down, and they're jumping up and down on top of this houseboat, and it's like being inside of a bass drum. It was so loud, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs. And this went on for like literally hours. And my mother says, "Terry, shut him up. Go shut him up. He's your friend. Go make him be quiet." I said, "I can't. What am I going to do?" So, but Joe starts going off, and Dirk Pitt's doing this, and Dirk Pitt's doing that. And the one thing I remember, he said, and Dirk Pitt fed all the women and children for a week from all the food that was trapped in his chest hairs or something. I mean, you're just zany, crazy stuff. And finally, the rain stopped, and they stopped. It was one of the best nights of my life. My brother passed away about 6 years ago, and I'd like to think that the two of them are up in heaven now, entertaining God with the Dirk Pitt stories. Joe always introduced me as his brother, and if I look at that picture, I'm sure you can see the resemblance between the two of us. And nobody ever questioned it. They just accepted it, and he was my brother in all respects. You know, in life, you have your family, and you got your friends. Your family, you inherit them, and for better or worse, see your family. But your friends, you get to choose. And I'll be ever forever grateful that Joe chose me as his friend and chose us as his friends. Our lives have been enriched and will never be the same. And I hate reading things, but I found this on the internet the other day. I want to read it to you because I think it might be appropriate for a lot of us here. Grief is like the wake behind a boat. It starts out as a huge wave that follows close behind you and is big enough to swamp and drown you if you suddenly stop moving forward. But if you keep moving, the big wake will eventually dissipate. And after a long time, the waters of your life get calm again. And that is when the memories of those who have left behind begin to shine as bright and as enduring as the stars above. That's from Jimmy Buffett. Thank you. I think, Randy, see if you can top this, okay? You're next.
Oh, good, there's one more after me. I was going to say it makes things easy when you're one of the last ones because everybody's kind of covered something for you. But please bear with me. I'm not an elegant speaker, certainly nothing like my chief over here, one of my good friends, Dan Adams. But, the funny thing is a lot of people say I don't know when and how to keep my mouth shut. So I'm going to go ahead and go on. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Randy Thompson. I'm a longtime friend, work partner, and I was told one of the three amigos. So I have to scratch that part out, because as I've been sitting here today, I've noticed there's a lot of three amigos here. It's more like 21 or so, I think. But anyway, that's okay, because Roy, right? The Pal Amigos, okay. And there's a story for that, okay. Originally, I met Joe when we started the police academy in 1983, which started a 41-year-long friendship. And the ironic thing was our academy class motto was the will to survive, the way of life. And I thought that was kind of ironic, because through the many years that Joe battled cancer, he certainly lived up to that. He had that will to survive. So I want to keep this short. Stop laughing, Dan. However, I would later on today, if you would like to share some stories at the reception, when we continue to celebrate Joe's life, there's tons and tons of them. And before I get started into my story, which Leslie helped me out a whole lot, it's going to be real short because she told everything about in my speech. So I got it shortened up. But I want to clarify, there was somebody in this room today that was present during that shooting. Joe's shooting. I was there. I can attest to it. I was the guy guarding the people out of the car, sitting on the curb, standing here like this, looking at them when that gunshot went off. Now you got a bunch of people in front of me going, "Why do you have your gun pulled on me?" "Because I don't know where that came from." And yeah, it was it was a different time. So anyway, I was there for it, okay? It was one of those times. So like I said, I was asked to spend just a couple of minutes to tell you stories about something that I remember about Joe. Well, the thing that I remember most was Lake Powell. So I know there was going to be plenty of golf stories and that type of thing. And trust me, I was not one of Joe's favorite golf partners. Okay. In fact, we were visiting Joe at the home, and Roy and I were there, and we were talking to him, and they were talking about golf, and I leaned over, and as he said, he was very, very tired and incapacitated, so he was just sitting there, laying there. But when they talked about golf, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, "Well, your favorite golf partner's here," and he went, "Ugh!" And I went, "Okay. Did he? Okay. All right. So, yeah, I'm not one of his favorite golf partners, and I knew there'd be plenty of golf stories and RV stories and trip stories and all that. So I wanted to talk about what made my memories, and that was, as it was mentioned, Joe loved kids. I mean, and he had a heart of gold. He was tough, but he had a heart of gold. And so over the 13 years that we went to Lake Powell together, we made a lot of memories, and as Leslie put, she talked about Joe teaching somebody how to drive a motorhome up and down hills and in the sand. Yeah, well, that was my daughter, and she didn't even have a driver's license. So, yeah, that was one of the stories, okay? And then my other daughter's here today, and you want to talk about a love-hate relationship. Those two, I'm telling you, whether it be in the water, out of the water at Powell, in the motorhome, it didn't matter. They just had to spar. They just had to butt heads. And that lasted forever, including the one we just watched the other night on film where Joe has her up in the air, spanking her on her bottom. Okay? The boys took lessons from Captain Joe. They talked about his boat and how much he loved his boat, and we had the Mastercraft and the Stingray and all of his things, and taking everybody out on his boat. Joe really loved the boat, and he took time to make sure that the kids all had great vacations with that. The boys, like I said, learning how to drive from Captain Joe, playing bocce ball with them, just everything. He loved the kids. Now, the last little story about Powell for family-wise I want to tell was a nighttime boat trip that Joe decided we should go on, and Roy would be the captain of it. Well, this was a trip that lasted down to the dam in the pitch black of the night. You couldn't see anything. And my wife, Jan, was in the boat with the kids, and she is petrified. We made this trip. We got back as Leslie was pacing the beach with a light because it was her kids that were in the boat, back and forth and back and forth. Another one of those memories. But for me, the one I remember the most was we got to Lake Powell, and it was, if you've never been to Lake Powell, they have storms there that are out of this world. I think somebody, Terry and them mentioned. And so this one day, the wind is blowing, everything's going on, rain's coming down, and we're not doing much. And Joe decides he's going to bring out a bottle of Jack Daniels. Remember this? Roy will remember. Yeah, so Joe, he brings out a bottle of Jack Daniels for us, and we're out on the back of his boat, and we're drinking Jack Daniels. Well, needless to say, by the end of the time and indulging some of this, we ended up on the back with our shirts pulled up in the air, singing the song, Rockin' a Beer Gut. And boy, between the three of us, we had a lot of beer gut there. And we were laughing and just having a good old time, and I can't imagine what all the rest of the people on that beach thought of us. So it was a good time. And I share these memories because all those great times we had together made us more than friends. It made us family. To this day, we share what my kids share with their kids. We come in, we were able to see PETA, which I cannot tell you what that stands for yet, but that would be Josh. And then Josh came up to me, gave me a big hug, and said, guess what? We have PETA number 2. And later on today, I'll tell you what PETA stands for, but that's where, and you got that at Lake Powell. So it's been my honor to be part of it, to work with Joe on the PD, to spend time, family times on vacation with him, to continue to be part of, and I hope always will be part of, their family. So my family wants to send love and prayers to all of Joe's family. Joe was a strong-willed, giving man, full of love that could always be counted on. He will always be in our minds and hearts forever. We will miss him, but we must let him go. So thank you, and I believe you're going to.
So we have our 3 of our grandchildren that would like to come up. This is our 3 oldest, London and McKinley and Colson. Oh, okay.
Okay. So, you probably know this, but I'm London. I am the favorite oldest granddaughter.
I am McKinley, and I am the favorite youngest granddaughter.
I am Colson, and I'm the favorite youngest
Oldest grandson. I don't really have that good of a memory, and you guys probably know that. But one thing that I remember very well was a conversation when I used to go to Oak Ridge, and you and Brownie were picking me up. And one thing we would always do after school was go to 7-Eleven and get Slurpees. And I remember a conversation. I was like, hey, can we get Slurpees today? He's like, we can get Slurpees on every day that ends with a Y. And being probably 3 or 4, I'm like, what? He's like, every day that ends with a Y. I'm like, great. That's like a conversation that I remember very well. What else, Kiki?
Every time that we would go somewhere like SeaWorld or Disneyland, we would get like a little souvenir, and it would always be a stuffed animal.
Every time.
Every time.
But yeah, we went to like San Diego or Disneyland almost every summer, right?
Yeah.
And here, hop off real quick. You're heavy. Yeah, we went camping every summer. Like we would take the RV and we would go to San Diego or
We went to Montana.
we went to Montana one time.
We did?
Yeah,
That's where you caught a fish.
it was Yellowstone. It was Yellowstone, right?
Oh, I
Yellowstone?
remember. What about Yosemite? I remember Yosemite.
We didn't. I don't think we went to Yosemite. I think it was Yellowstone.
We went a lot of places.
But it was Yellowstone, right?
Yeah, Yellowstone.
But as a kid and like to this day, I really don't like roller coasters. So there was this one time we went to Disneyland, and I think I was 9, and we went on like Big Thunder, right? Of course, I love that right now, but then I was really scared of it. So there is a picture that he took on his camera of him smiling, like going up like that big part, and me like this. And I see that picture every time, and I laugh because it was so funny. Because, yeah. What do you think? What else?
Sometimes after dinner,
Have a good one.
he would just yell, road trip, and we would all jump in the car and go to like,
McDonald's.
yeah,
Ice cream.
McDonald's and get ice cream.
So this is one of the favorite things that I like to talk about. Every time, like, we would jump out and scare him, or we would show him something that surprised him, he would go, "Holy doo-doo, Batman!" And that is, like, one of the funniest things that he has ever said. And he said it, like, every day.
He did.
It was really funny.
Okay.
What else?
Is there anything else? You good? You sure? Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you for so many wonderful stories. I think we're going to conclude with Jack. Where's Jack? Did he just? Oh, there he is. Here he's coming up. Thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate you being here today.
All right, can everyone do me a favor? Just stand up for a second, stretch your legs. I know we've been sitting in a while here, and what I want to do is I want to share something with you that is going to be the most important thing you've ever heard in your life. All right, if you're done, you could sit down and just kind of focus in on me for a minute, because I know that if Bob was here, y'all can sit down now, you're good. Just wanted you to get up and get some blood flowing, because what I got to say is really, really important. And if Bob was here, he would affirm that. He would say to all of you right now, right here, pay close attention to what Jack's going to say, because it's the most important thing you'll ever hear in your life. Bob and I had a very unusual relationship, a very special relationship. The reason is I'm a fireman. I know it doesn't look like it right now, but I'm injured, I'm off work, and so Joe and I were in the EMS first responder culture together, and we would often banter back and forth about who's better, cops or firemen. As you can imagine, I didn't really have to defend myself that much because we already know who's better. And it was quite fun, the bantering that we would have back and forth. And so one day, he said to me, hey, let's go camping. So we went camping with our wives, and he wanted me to take him coyote hunting. And at him and his gadgets, he's got all this stuff on he'd never been before. And one thing was he had binoculars. And I said, Bob, you're not going to need those. They come in really fast. You're not going to need that. But he had a bunch of gadgets on him, being prepared to go hunting. And so we set out the decoy and the sound, and sure enough, within 5 minutes, here comes a huge coyote come running in. Well, Bob's got the gun. It's his turn to shoot, and he misses. And I looked at him, and I said, hey, a fireman could have hit that. Are you sure you were a cop? So we had a great time together. And so what I want to do is introduce myself to you very briefly, very quickly. My name is Jack, and I get the privilege to be a pastor here. And Bob and Leslie called this their church home. And in my opening statement, I said that Bob and Leslie are a very important part of this church and have been for quite some time. As a matter of fact, it wasn't too long ago that Bob helped us install our security and protocol measures here. That's where I got to see the cop side of Bob come out, making sure certain doors were locked on Sundays. And I'm thinking about the building burning, and he's thinking about people being shot. So we brought different perspectives as we spent time together. And as Bob and I began to grow even closer in our walk, it reminds me, it doesn't even seem like it was that long ago that their boys went through our youth group. These two young boys, believe it or not, before they were in the military, were fun little boys that we would take on river trips with us and try to bounce them out of our inner tubes behind boats. And we had a great time. And so I want to draw your attention more specifically back to my opening statement, where I used the word celebrate. To most people, the word celebrate would seem so out of place at a funeral, because funerals aren't really places that people celebrate. It's usually for a time of mourning and weeping. And while there is some of that going on here today, overall, this funeral will be a time of celebration. And that is because of one simple truth. And that truth is that Bob put his faith and trust in Jesus as his Savior, therefore allowing us to come together to celebrate because Bob has graduated to his heavenly home. And for that, we rejoice. You'll never hear me say, I hope he's there, because I know he's there. Now, to understand our ability to celebrate in a time like this story begins back in the beginning of the Bible, where we see sin enter into the world through the disobedience of Adam and Eve. God had given them strict instructions not to eat of the fruit from one particular tree, but because of free will and like all of humanity, they sought for something greater than the world had to offer. They purposely made the choice to disobey the Lord. And from that moment on, the world has been in a fallen, sinful state. Even today, our world seems to be unraveling right before our eyes. So fast forwarding from Adam and Eve to our culture today, we still have the same problem. People wanting to live the way that they want to live. Living in total rebellion to the Lord, making wrong choices, and not believing in the true deity of Jesus. But that wasn't the way that Bob wanted to live his life. Well, I'm sure he had moments like we all do. His heavenly eternity was established because of his choice to do life with Jesus. What do I mean to do life with Jesus? Some of you may not be aware of this simple truth, but that is, Jesus wants to do life with you. We find in Psalms 139 where it says, you saw me before I was born. Every day of my life I was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. But here's the truth. Jesus will not force himself upon you. And one of the greatest acts of love by Jesus is that he allows you and I to live the life we want. He leaves the choice completely up to you. You can choose for the Lord to be a part of your life, or you could simply refuse that relationship. You can live for him or against him. It will always be your choice. But know this, God's love for you is so great that it came with a heavy price, a price that would cost Jesus his life. We find in this famous verse that is pronounced quite often around the world of John 3:16 that for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, and whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. But what people fail to understand is John 3:17, where it says there is no judgment against anyone who believes in him. But anyone who does not believe in him has already been judged for not believing in God's one and only Son. So therefore, with verse 17 comes the reality that if anyone does not believe in him, they will be judged and separated from Jesus in heaven forever. That is why there is a world of difference between the way a Christian views death and the way that others view it. For the unbeliever, death is dreaded. It's a dreaded foe, something to be avoided at all costs, something so feared that we try to dismiss it from our minds. But for the believer, death is a defeated enemy because Jesus took on humanity, adding to his humanity and his deity on the cross of Calvary. He partook of death in our place. Therefore, all of those who have trusted in Jesus, there is no longer any fear of death. For he paid the ultimate penalty for our sins. He rose from the dead, assuring us of eternal life after death, life in the presence of the Lord. But please understand, I'm not talking about the complexities of religion. I'm not talking about your effort to get into heaven, because the Bible says there is nothing, I mean nothing, that we can do to save ourselves or get into heaven. But it doesn't stop there. The Bible has good news for us. It says that there is a free gift, a gift for you and I found within its text. And it says that heaven awaits those who have put their faith and trust in Jesus, just like Bob did. We find this truth in Ephesians 2, where it says, "For it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." Friends and family, Jesus wants to break the bondage of sin in your life. He wants us to live a life of purpose. He wants to do life with you. And when it comes to eternal destination, the Bible speaks of heaven, and I believe, if not most, all people want to go to heaven. And their own minds, many believe that they're going to make it. I'm here to tell you that it's false doctrine. There's nothing that you can do of yourself to be saved. But getting into heaven is not a matter of trying to be good or even to go to church. The only requirement is that you have a personal relationship with Jesus, because he exchanged his life for yours, absorbing your sins, my sins, on the cross, and from him rising again so that we could have a relationship with him. So this is why we can celebrate on a day like this, all because of the work of Jesus. I've personal experience with cancer. My father-in-law, who was a pastor, who's the team chaplain for the Angels, the Rams football team, and the Ducks hockey team, was diagnosed with cancer at 46 years old, died at 48. Of all people, you would think he would be one that would not have cancer, doing God's work. But as he moved on, what I've learned from him is he taught me how to die. He taught me how to die well. As he laid there in his hospital bed, there was many times nurses and doctors would come into his room in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, I know that you're dying, but I need your help. My life's a mess." There was something about Jesus and my father-in-law that changed everything. So friends, I implore you to choose wisely. Think carefully, because your day's coming too. Will you live a life walking with Jesus or a life running from him? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your time that you allowed Bob to be here on this side of eternity. He'll be missed by his family and his friends, and I ask that you would pour your blessings out on this family. We thank you for your love towards us and giving us an opportunity to live a life of purpose. Father, many of us are going to leave here today and ponder our own mortality. And so I would pray that you would meet people where they're at. This is a time that funerals remind us of our own destination. So I would ask, Lord, that you would meet people and people would come to the realization that there's something beyond the grave that is better, that is eternity. So we just implore you, Lord, to speak to us where we're at, comfort this family, be with us as we go to the house of a time of reconciliation and remembrance and all of the food and the things that are going to happen, Lord. So thank you that Bob is in your presence here today because he made a decision to follow you. It's your son's holy and precious name we pray. Amen.